What's up, guys? We're gonna roll beats, and today I'm gonna be showing you guys how to make a good melody every time. If you guys haven't subbed already or turn post when it's on, make sure you do so. It does help it a lot, so let's hop right into it. So starting out, my BPM is 160. Doesn't need to be that, but that's just what I have if you want to follow along. And we just got two little pianos here, all right, and then just some drums and a little bass, all right. So what we're gonna do is just go ahead and get into the first step. All right, so first up we have the bass line. Now I'm gonna structure this so it's very like chopped up, so it's easy to follow. You can click through wherever you need, right? So I'm gonna color code this. I'm gonna use the bass line as red, because this is the most important part, especially if you don't have a scale or you're not really sure how to make chords just by yourself. So what we can do is just make like a chord. Now you can come up here and you can choose like a minor or a major. I want to go for like a lo-fi vibe, so I'm gonna take a major. We could just do a regular triad, right? And you can just put it anywhere you want. So we can put it on E or wherever you want. And then there we have our bass line. So we need to make this look like a bass line. So there's plenty of things you could do. You could do something like this, right? Or if you want to do something like this, it's pretty much up to you. So I'm gonna just try to, and you could even do something like that. Pull that down, do something like that. Right. So I'm gonna pull this up an octave and we can roll with something like this. And let's actually pull this one out. Quantize it. Right. And let's maybe even offset it. All right. So that is our bass line. And from here we will build chords. So that's what we'll do next. Okay. So now we got our bass line. So now what we want to do is finish our chords. Now this part is required in order for this to work and not have any issues. But what we want to do is add a 7th chord to every single bass line here, right? So all of these you want to make these 7th chords. Now the reason for that is because it's going to make it easier to build your melody out later, right? Because you won't have to guess what notes to use. So let's go ahead and do that. So if you don't know how to make a 7th chord, right, or a chord, you can just use stamps, and pretty much every DAW has something where you can, it'll show you how to make a chord or whatever, right? So you could mess around with a minor 7th or major 7th, right? And I already kind of know what chords to use here, but you could do something like this, right, and see if it works, which that doesn't sound bad, but I know that right here, this should be a minor. Okay. All right, so that is just that step. I'm gonna stop it there just so it's kind of clear and cut. So let's go ahead and move on to the next part. Now before we move on to the next step, what I want to do is actually change these chords around, because I'm not really liking this, so I might switch these two. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that, and I'm gonna just do that live, just so people don't get confused on what I did or whatever. I'm gonna hold Alt, or actually is it Alt or Shift? Pull that back. Hold Shift and you can drag everything. We could do something like that, and I'm gonna pull this up an octave. Okay, so I'm gonna see what that sounds like. And that's kind of more on par with what I was hearing in my head. So we're gonna use that. So now we can continue and move on to the next step. Okay, so here is pretty much the last step for the chords. Now this is pretty easy. So what we want to do, I'm just pick a different color, and I think I'm gonna pick blue. And then we want to take the second note, so where this red is, which should be your bass line, the first note up from that, right? So the second note within the entire chord, you want to highlight, and I'm gonna just color that. And then what you want to do is copy it and then pull it up an octave. So you just want to pull it up an octave, and I'm gonna press Shift D just to make it smaller and just copy it over. And the reason I'm doing this kind of dotted melody is so you can kind of, so it's, I don't know, just so it's easier to look at rather than just like this, because it may look a little confusing. I don't know, at least for me. So now we can kind of see this, right? So with this blueprint, we should be able to make a melody, and I'll just play all the way through. I'm gonna pull this down an octave, and that's more like it. All right, so we don't need to keep this, but I'm just keep it here just for consistency. So now what we can do is move on to actually creating the melody from this. Okay, so now we're gonna start our melody. Now, realistically, what we did here, right, I just went slow on purpose, so everything was kind of chopped up nicely and easy to follow. But realistically, this will take about probably a minute to 2 minutes, depending on the skill level, to make something like this. Probably not even, probably like 30 seconds, okay? So if we go here, right, so once we have this prepared, you should have your ghost notes on, right? And to make a good melody every single time, right? Now, obviously you can deviate and use other notes and stuff, but if you just want to kind of stick to the code and make a good melody for certain every time, this is what you do. You start on the bass or the root note at the bottom of your first chord. So right here, let's probably cut this in half. And then what you want to do is from here on out, at least like on every bar, at the start of every bar, you want to use the third note within your chord. So the third note here will be 1, 2, 3, and the third note here will be 1, 2, 3. So just the original triad. So if I just made a triad, it will be the third or top note in the triad, right? You want to do that for every single one. So 1, 2, 3. Okay, now I'm gonna stick with the start of the actual chord so I have a rhythm. Okay, so that is pretty much what you want to do there. So I'm gonna chop it there so it's easy to follow, and we can kind of go into the next step. All right, so now what you need to do is pretty much connect them all. Right now, as you can see, it's kind of like a snake-like motion, right? So it's kind of going up and coming back down, and when it comes back down, what it's doing is pretty much coming back home, as some people like to say. You don't need to do that every time, but it does work. So for here, I'm gonna just fill these in, and I might just use a different shade. Let's do orange. Actually, it's kind of hard to see. Let's do something like this, right? So these are fillers, and we could do something like this. Right? You can kind of take from the other notes that you have, since we don't have a scale, and then probably pull this out, let it breathe a bit. And then let's just make this easier on ourselves. And we can just end on this and connect these. Right, and then there's a million ways, literally unlimited ways to go about this. You could do whatever you want. This is just like something that for sure works, right? So right, and it loops perfectly and it sounds good, whatever. Right, so there is the melody. So now what we can do is, I guess we can go ahead and add our little bass. Now real quick before we do the bass, there's like a bonus thing I want to show you with this. So I'm gonna just make a clone just so we don't mess this original up. So what you can do is from here, you can move this over to the left. So we would delete this. Now you would remember all of these notes and everything, right? But delete this, and then what you can do is take this and move this over. Right, and I like to, if you want to make it more like humanized and not robotic, I would probably put it somewhere in between. So right here is where I will put it. Okay, and then from here you can kind of continue building out a melody, and this will make it sound a little bit more emotional. So for example, we can kind of move these along, and then we can go back to these notes that we were using. And I'm gonna try to keep these consistent as best as I can. Okay, and then from here, I'm gonna just use this. Okay, and then this is all consistent. Let's probably move these over. Something like that, all right? And then you can see. You can see it's a little bit more emotional now. So we can copy this over, and I'm gonna go ahead and copy this as well. And I'm not sure if I want to keep this. I might just, okay, we can just see what that sounds like. I probably sped that part up. All right, so from here, let's copy it over, and then just for variation, really what you want to do, right? And you can always go back to your root. So we can, let's take this color. Let's go to this, and then we can kind of mess around with this little melody a little bit, which we don't really got to do anything. We just do a little wiggle, and then we good, right? And then we just play the whole thing real quick. Okay, and then what I'm gonna do is make this a little bit larger because I want to make this to a sample, and I want a part with only the chords. So yeah, that's pretty much all you need to do, right? I think I covered everything I want to show you. So what we can do now is go ahead and add our bass and then our drums. All right, so I went ahead and just made this little pattern here just to make it kind of consistent because I didn't really like it being so offset. So what we need to do now is just take our bass, which is the red, and that's why I color coded so it's easy to just look at it right away. So we're just gonna take the red part on our bass and then literally just copy this the whole time. All right, pretty simple. All right, so that is the bass. Now we can go ahead and throw some drums down. All right, so I didn't actually think about this, but we are in 160 and this is supposed to be a lo-fi kind of beat, right? So what we need to do is turn down the BPM, but what I'm gonna do first is turn this into a sample so it kind of sounds a little bit more, I guess, convincing as like a lo-fi type of song or whatever. So I'm gonna take this, and you don't have to do this, but I think it'll just fit the style. Right click, consolidate. Okay, so now we have our track. We can rename it S for sample. We could probably color this something, I don't know, this will be good. And then I'm just gonna, I guess we could just hide that. Okay, so we got our sample. So what I'm gonna do real quick is double click, and then we're going to right click 4 bars, and I think I'm gonna do like we could do 70. I think 70 might be a good BPM for lo-fi. And let's stretch it. So in order to stretch it like this, you want to make sure that this little button is clicked. Okay, so now we have our little sample. So now we can go ahead and do our drums. All right, so now everything is set up for our drums, and what I want to do last is come to this swing and turn this up about 20 to 40%. We could do like 26, it doesn't matter, but somewhere in between there's a sweet spot. So I'm gonna just go ahead and do these drums real quick. It's gonna be pretty simple. So all right, so I'm not sure if I sped that little part up, but if you want to get like a little lo-fi groove, what you could do is place one here, and let's move these out. And then what you could do is hold shift and just pull this over like 3 times. 1, 2, 3. And then you can get a lo-fi groove, and you could actually edit you could do something like that with the velocity. I'm just copy this over. And just a little trick you can use to kind of get that little vibe. So the drums are done. So now what I'm gonna do is add some processing and just kind of show you my process on that. All right, so just real quick, I just like to show this just to give people an idea of what they can put on their stuff. So for the kick pump for this, I just put my sample into a track and then put a limiter. And then what you want to do is side chain your kick. Now you could turn this up if you want, and I'll just even turn it up a little bit, but I don't do it too much because the kick will be too loud. And then from here, you right click your kick, and then it's side chain. And then you turn this threshold all the way to the left. And then from here, you can kind of mess with it. You can see it's doing the side chain. Now for my drums, for lo-fi stuff, I always put RC20 on the bus. So I just put these in the bus, and then this is just my own preset. And this is just to make it kind of sound less crispy. Something like that. And then my master, I just use this just for like some character on there, and I'll just show you the difference. And that's pretty much it. So that's gonna be it for this video. Hopefully everything was helpful. Make sure y'all like and subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.